Scanning for audio.
And welcome to the Tin Dog Podcast. This time I'm going to be talking about the WARGAMES.
The Time Lords are an immensely civilized race. We can simply to observe and gather knowledge.
And that wasn't enough for you?
No, of course not. With a whole galaxy to explore, eons of time, countless civilizations to meet. I'm afraid we've landed right in the middle of one of the worst wars in human history.
Court finds you guilty of espionage.
This whole place is divided into time zones. 1917 zone, Roman zone, American Civil War zone.
There's something very strangely wrong here.
You will answer me now, or I will destroy your mind.
Run, Zoe! Run!
They came in a space-time machine.
It is like the TARDIS. Who else would have space-time machines?
The secret of space-time travel is known only to you and to your people. This is the war chief to all war zones.
It's my duty to shoot you.
This is a command direct from the warlord.
Stand still! You are completely surrounded!
Doctor!
I kill him.
No!
When the Time Lords get him, he'll wish you had killed him.
Don't come any closer, no!
You have returned to us, Doctor. Your travels are over.
When I was very young, I went to my very first convention. It was in a church hall in Byker, that's in Newcastle upon Tyne, in the UK. And there were some stalls around, and there were some speakers on stage, and to be honest, I didn't really recognise someone, and like I said, I was very young. In one of the rooms, in the basement, a VHS player was wired in, playing old episodes of Doctor Who. Now this was the 70s or very early 80s, and the idea of owning a VHS recorder was just incredible. But here, squirreled away in a long-forgotten corner, surrounded by large cardboard Cybermen, well, at least the Tomb of the Cybermen logo, was an episode I'd never seen. It was the WARGAMES, Patrick Troughton's last ever story. Now then I didn't realise how important this story was, or indeed, and more importantly for how long I spent in this room, how long this story was. 10 episodes of running around, thinking they've solved it, getting locked up, escaping, getting locked up again, escaping, and running around. Now I'd never seen these stories before, and I really had no problem with watching something in black and white. But I was mesmerised, and for a very long time this was it. This was the only time I ever saw this story. Obviously, when it came out on VHS to buy, I bought it, and it was a lovely little classic, but it didn't quite have the same magic I remembered. The last ever Troughton story. Whenever anyone talks about this story, people always seem to fixate on the last 2 episodes, and I suppose there's a very good reason to do so. And it's almost impossible to talk about this story without giving away some spoilers. So before I start talking about the end, I'll talk about the beginning. And before I talk about the beginning, I just want to say, if you're listening to this podcast after the DVD has been released, stop listening. Get disc 2. Put DVD number 2 into the player. Let it go through its lovely menus and then head to the subtitles menu. Move the DVD controller up and down until the Doctor Who logo appears, and then you can watch possibly the greatest Easter egg ever to be on any Doctor Who disc. Well, ever. Obviously, if you're listening to this before the DVD release, you can do it that day. Don't bother watching the story. Skip straight to this extra. Watch it. You'll be happy. Now that does count as digressing. Here's a quick word from Tolly Galashon.
Noisy.
Hello, this is a promo for the Flash and Blade podcast. I'm Tony, and this is my plucky girl assistant, Jo.
Hello.
That was a bit breathy, Kensington Miss, wasn't it?
Hello.
Anyway, what do we do? What do we talk about?
Oh, we talk about stuff and things.
And things?
Yeah, in equal measures.
Stuff and things. Doctor Who, science fiction, all sorts of silly stuff like that, but mainly Doctor Who, because it's my obsession. I'm the ancient wise one, and Jo knows, well, bugger all really about it.
I'm the plucky one, apparently, allegedly.
Yes, she's very, very, very plucky. We get Jo's completely fresh views on all sorts of things to do with Doctor Who, and my ancient, ingrained, indefinable magic views. So that's the Flash and Blade podcast, available from www.flashandblade.org.uk, iTunes, Podcast Alley, blah, 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 blah. That's the end of this promo. Toodles!
Bye!
When WARGAMES went into production, it was meant to be the last ever Doctor Who story. Some other stories had fallen through, and the Doctor had only been rejuvenated the once, after a 6-year run, which, let's face it, is quite impressive for almost any TV series. It could wind down and come to an end. Just as black and white television was fading away, the Doctor could also get to fade away as well. Troughton wanted to leave, and when Troughton wanted to leave, Fraser-Hines wanted to go. And as they've both said over the years at conventions, it was their wives who thought it best that they move on. And we can live with that. They had, of course, had the time of their lives playing these parts. And so we're all aware that this is literally the end of an era. Okay, so the WARGAMES is just a bit too long. 10 episodes of anyone's money is a bit much. But if you like quantity as well as quantity in your Doctor Who, this is a DVD for you. The basic plot is relatively simple and relatively misleading. The Doctor, Jamie and Zoe arrive on Earth when they find themselves in the midst of, well, the First World War. Or do they? As the story progresses, things aren't quite what they seem. Futuristic technology starts appearing up in the middle of the Somme. People can't quite remember how long they've been there. And then things get even more odd when people from other time periods, other wars, turn up. Eventually this gets so out of hand that the Doctor has to finally give in and say, this is just too big a job for me to handle alone. I need the help of my own people, here called the Time Lords. Yes, it's the end of an era. We lose some of the mystery of the Doctor's race, some of the mystery of where he's from. And for a lot of people, that's a very bad thing. But I don't mind. I'm a child of the 70s and 80s, where we'd seen the Panopticon and where Time Lords and Gallifreyans are all established history. But here it's a massive shock. You see, I've done it myself. I've skipped over the first 8 episodes of mystery and intrigue and getting locked up and escaping, and then jumped straight to the final 2 episodes. You just can't help it when talking about this story. The trial sequence, the final departure of much beloved characters and actors can't fail to bring a tear to the eye. So apart from 10 episodes of absolute gloriousness across 2 discs, what do you get in his 3-disc set? Well, the 3rd disc is just extras. Obviously the first 2 discs, that's the ones with episodes 1 to 5 and episodes 6 to 10, have commentaries. Here we have Fraser-Hines, Wendy Padbury, Phil Maddock, Jane Sherwin and Graham Weston, and of course co-writer Terence Dix, as well as the script editor Derek Sherwin, no relation, oh hang on, yes they are, and our beloved production notes and programme subtitles. They're across the first 2 discs. But it's the 3rd disc that intrigues most people. 1 disc, completely full of nothing but extras. First off, there's a making-of, called Warzone. It's actually a very nicely executed piece, worthy of inclusion in any to entertain range. The next mini-documentary is Shades of Grey, which talks all about how black and white had its own technical and artistic constraints embedded in its production, and how the changeover to colour would affect the shows. One of those nice little relaxing now and then visits to the locations is very nice, as most of the WARGAMES early footage takes place in what was basically a rubbish dump. We get to see it in these enlightened days as a new country park. There's a very nice piece on Dudley Simpson, the Doctor's composer, which looks back on the first 5 years of his work. Again, looking back on somebody else's work is Sylvia James in conversation. She was the makeup designer. Here, Sylvia talks about her work all the way through the Troughton era. There's a very nice, if slightly predictable, documentary talking about regeneration, where we get to see some very nice montage stuff, but we also get to explore the ideas and take a closer look at each of the regenerations. The next 2 documentaries, and trust me, there's quite a lot on these discs, are my favourites. The first is called Time Zones, where historians discuss the reality behind the various time zones that are featured inside the WARGAMES. There's political historian Dr. Martin Farr, military historians, as well as a host of others. And again, just like last month's DVD release, we have Stripped for Action. Here we're dealing with the Second Doctor's time. And to be honest, the Second Doctor appearing in comic strip are some of the most surreal stories. A rather new feature, and I really hope this comes back, is On Target Malcolm Hulke. Now this is the first one which features writers from the Target range talking about their work. Almost, but not quite finally, you have Devious. Devious I'd never heard of, and I must admit, as a Doctor Who fan, I feel quite bad about that. I'm sure I should have come across it at some point. It's a fan film. However, it's a very important fan film. As discussed in another Tin Dog podcast some time ago, the idea of Series 6B, where the Second Doctor, or some other Doctor, which happens to exist before Jon Pertwee's Doctor, has an adventure. This is one of those adventures. It also has a commentary by the production team, and it features, and this is why it's important, the last ever appearance of Jon Pertwee as the Third Doctor. That's something well worth tracking down, but remember, it is a fan film. As well as all of that, there is a coming soon. Coming soon, the Black Guardian trilogy. 3 stories with Turlough. Oh yeah. Some nice 5-Doctor fun. Featuring one of my own personal favourites, Enlightenment. And with that, I shall fade away, except to say that please consider buying yourself a lovely Whostrology, visiting eBay, and keeping the Tin Dog podcast running. So until next time, where I'm sure we'll be talking about either a very old Doctor Who or some very new Torchwood. Be seeing you.
There's one thing I always meant to ask Jack. Back in the old days, I wanted to know about that doctor of his. The man who appears out of nowhere and saves the world, except sometimes he doesn't. All those times in history when there was no sign of him, I wanted to know why not. But I don't need to ask anymore. I know the answer now. Sometimes the Doctor must look at this planet and turn away in shame. I'm recording this in case anyone ever finds it, so you can see. You can see how the world ended.
You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Contact us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk.